I'm just me. Oh.
I did my all, but I guess my all may have been too much. 'Cause Lord knows we're not getting anywhere.
Are you singing more music from
Seems
young
we're always blowing.
whippersnappers listening
Whatever we've got going, and it seems at times with all we've... It's James Ingram. Welcome to another Carmudgeon episode where I sing things that Derek doesn't know because he was born in 2000. Hold on, this is the part I don't get about you. On the one hand, you were born in 2016. On the other hand, you were born in 1904. Which
in
is
either case, I'm not aware of what's happening in 1988 because either it's all young whippersnappers blasting their rock and roll musics.
They were dancing. 88 was probably around the time when
listening to their raps. I mean, either way, it's not something I was listening to either because it hadn't been recorded yet, or it was. I was just like young people listening to their raps and whippersnappers blasting their the stereo with the boombox. Thank you.
Keep going. Continue to embarrass yourself by all means. Welcome to another episode. We did that already. What are we talking about today?
You have dementia? Now who's old?
It's me. I'm the old one. And I don't have dementia. It's more like oxygen-induced amnesia.
Okay. Got it.
Tends to fuck with me. Anyway, so I think we should talk about badges.
About how, do any of your cars have badges on them?
Yeah, actually, Struck's got a badge. 2316 has a badge. All of them have badges
except for one. And it was delivered.
My E30. So I haven't. What the fuck? Seriously, with that thing? I'm sorry for everyone in the background. We have one of these little spinny things on the roof that evacuates air, and at some point in time, it decides to go ee, ee, ee.
Focus.
What? Who are you? Hi. Welcome to another episode of Carmudgeon. My name is Jason Camisa, and this is Derek Tam-Scott. Today we're going to talk about cars with badges. This is the what? In my day, we didn't have badges. This is when your next 94-year-old rant is going to be.
You were just happy to have an automobile with wheels and brakes.
And it caught on fire, and that's the way it was, and we liked it. My E30 has a badge delete kit from the factory. So somebody actually checked a option code to order the car without a 325i badge because
it's very German.
Yeah, the Germans, like in the US, I feel like we're more likely to add like an AMG badge
or an M badge. Oh, right. The M320i, you're fooling everybody.
Yes, exactly. But the Germans are far more likely to, for example, not only not want to broadcast that they bought the big engine because that would be a little gauche, but they were like on the E32 7 Series, there was an option you can get to not only delete the 750i badge from the V12s, but to also delete the square exhaust tips that told everyone that it was a V12. So you'd have a car that looked like a 728, but of course did the starter sound. So cool. But this whole
I would love to do that.
You would love
I would get an E28 M5 and I put steel wheels on it and a 518 badge and mud flaps.
Yeah, I did. So I bought a 94 Mark III Golf 4-door. And it was an automatic, it was 2-liter, and I bought it as a beater and I couldn't deal with it. So I swapped out the automatic and the 2-point slow and put a VR6 and a 5-speed in it. And when I did the swap initially, I changed nothing. So it still had the 14-inch steel wheels with hubcaps on it, and the GL badge on the back, and the downturn sort of single exhaust. It looked just like a Golf.
Was it lowered?
4-door. No lowered, no nothing. Just completely stock looking. And
what color was it?
Silver, because it's me. It looked completely stock, and it was so awesome to like street race people because you pull up next to a light to like some Civic hatchback with like a B16 swap, and they'd rev their engine, and I rev mine, and
why would they rev at you in a stock?
Oh, because I'd rev first, because I would start. I'd pull up at a brisk rate or something, and just vroom, and there was the quiet little pea shooter 4-cylinder exhaust on it. And so they would hear something, and I'd look over, I'd be like, "Sup?" And we just kind of start the whole race thing, and I would destroy the guys, just completely leave them for dead. And my favorite sort of red light post second favorite red light post-race exchange ever was this kid pulls up and he's like, what the fuck? That thing pulled away like a VR6. And I'm like, it is a VR. And he was like, Volkswagen didn't make a 4-door VR6. And I'm like, yeah, but I did. And he was like, he was just so upset. So I love the idea that this car looked completely like 4-door, 4-cylinder, nothing, and was way faster than it looked.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of German way of like, this motherfucker thinks I have a 4-cylinder, but it's a V12.
That's very German. I mean, I think at the opposite end of the spectrum, like you think about all these cars that have like weird things on the outside where you're like, oh, say, did you know my car's an automatic? Or like it's got fuel injection, or, I mean, there's like a long history of putting usually technical stuff on the outside of cars.
So it's a uniquely, first of all, I should say my biggest pet peeve is actually modern car companies putting like BMW putting M badges on everything and Audi putting RS badges on it, like all that stuff. Yeah. But the trim level thing always bothered me. Like, you know, every Corolla you look at is either a base, a DX, or, you know, an LE or something. And even VW started to do that a couple of years ago, and I sort of poked and made fun of the product planner, and he told me something I didn't realize, that the reason they went to an S, SE, SEL hierarchy and put the badges on the car is for resale purposes. Because when you identify the car with a badge on the back of it, it will get its own entry in used car
Kelley Blue Book,
and all the other stuff. So you can, you know, it's not like the average Jetta is worth X amount of dollars. It's a Jetta SEL, which was a more expensive car to buy than an SE, is worth this much. So the percentage wise,
and they care about resale because they can go to customers who are buying cars and be like, our cars have higher resale value.
Well, lease, for example. So, you know, lease prices is based on the purchase price minus the residual value. So you pay that difference plus a financing charge, and that's what your lease price is based out of. If you can bump up your residual values, your lease prices come down, and you can advertise a new Jetta for $199 a month, which helps sell cars. So I don't particularly care, like, why does the world need to know that I have a DX versus an LE versus an SE, or like whatever, like who are you trying to prove? It's a fucking Corolla. But there's actually a good reason for it. It may cost you like, you know, $3 a month less to lease your Corolla because it says DX on it. I don't know. But to your point, the whole idea, like the things that car companies have put on the outside of cars is hilarious.
I've compiled a list.
I know. I can't wait for this.
One of my favorite, well, the earliest one that I could find is, it's not actually, I think, technically factory, but it looks like a sort of warning label, and it says 4-wheel brakes. It's in German, Vierbremse. And it's on like a Mercedes from the 1920s. But I think that it's like a functional thing where it's like, hey there, other motorists, like this thing has 4-wheel brakes, so don't follow too closely.
Like, don't be tailgating. So that is the early version, German version of get off my ass.
Yeah.
Or like I brake for tailgaters.
Yeah. So like I think it's a 1920s Mercedes, but I did, it's kind of cool.
That's cool.
And Jaguar did that again with the Mark II because it had 4-wheel disc brakes in the late 50s, early 60s. But then it's like actually
GM. I love that GM always had disc brakes on the brake.
Yes,
like
on the brake pedal.
So, I'm going to apply the brakes now. Oh dear me, it's got disc brakes. I won't press so hard.
Or power brakes. Yeah.
But actually, I mean, that typical Mercedes, they were not, especially back in the day, want to do things for marketing purpose. It's a really good thing for other people to know that you could stop, and so. That's probably maybe a factor in why GM put ABS badges on fucking everything in the 80s and 90s. I mean, they were in the wheel center caps, like as if the center cap of your fucking wheel has to know that you have anti-lock brakes. And then there was the 4-wheel anti-lock badges that you got, as opposed to the 2-wheel, like the brain power involved in putting ABS only on 2 wheels we could do an episode on the stupidest things ever done.
Done?
Oh yeah. And here's the joke. They were done on the rear wheels of vans and pickup trucks. So
that's because they're really lightly loaded and the back end's going to be walking around.
So the great thing is your rear wheels didn't lock, but your front did, so you just understeered right off the road.
But at least you did it going straight, right?
I mean, I guess unless there was a road crown, in which case because Sir Isaac Newton says you're going whichever way the tree is.
Or if the car was turning, heaven forbid.
Yeah.
Other fun badges, Automatique, which would be like a very German thing. Like you would see old VWs and Mercedes, and then
Even Beetles.
Yeah, Beetles and squarebacks and stuff like that. The Americans, of course, would do the same thing, but with their trade names. So like, what is
Torque Flight.
Dynaflow and Powerglide and all that stuff.
We always had the best names. I've said this before, but Americans always have the best names for everything. Germans would be like, automatic transmission because it's an automatic transmission. We're like, hydromatic.
Let's put the word jet in there because that's cool.
Because that's cool. That's always cool.
What other examples?
You know what? I wonder if, did Honda actually, so I remember when Honda first started to put ABS in the cars, go back to brakes for a second, they did not call ABS ABS. They called it ALB, anti-lock braking. And that makes sense because ABS, it comes from the German, Anti-Blockiersystem, so anti-lock system. And I just remember all the Acura, like the original 86 Acura Legend had ALB instead of ABS. And I believe some of the Hondas actually had an ALB badge. Somebody's gonna fucking correct me and tell me I'm wrong. But I know at least in the marketing brochures it was ALB, not ABS.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a new...
That was before those things were standardized, like the name ABS.
Yeah.
Anyway.
What other examples are some of your favorites?
Like the valve count. Like, all right, so I have a Scirocco 16V. That is it's not a Scirocco with a 16 valve badge on it. The car's name is Scirocco 16V. And that was to differentiate it from the Scirocco period. So there was a Scirocco.
Simultaneously available?
Yeah, with an 8 valve. And then there was the same thing, it was a GTI and a GTI 16 valve.
That's right, and even Saturn did that too when you could get the single cam or twin cam motors, right? There was like the
well, that was
SL1 and SL2.
But I don't think they were badged. The SL2 just had the full width taillight that said twin cam.
Ooh, the heck blender.
Yeah, as the Germans would call it, very good. In the middle of the dent-proof body panels, it said twin cam. And that, does the person behind you need to know that you have two
No, but
camshafts?
they need to, the person buying it needs to know so that they feel like they've gotten something additional for their money that is...
So, and you get 30 more horsepower, but you don't care about that. All you care is showing...
No, you want other people to know.
I've never sneezed on this show. Hold on. And of course, the second you announce you have to sneeze, it's gone. I'm sorry. But seriously, should I put it, and that was real, I did actually have to sneeze, and you know it's going to be a sneak attack and it's coming. But would I put a sign on the back of my car about to sneeze? No, so why should I have a twin cam or 16 valve or
Because you want other people know.
VOHC?
Because you want other people to know you spent the money.
Oh, that's so pathetic.
It's like EFI. It's very American, right?
EFI.
Consumerism.
Yeah, it's true.
It's probably done for American markets.
EFI. Okay, let's think of why would you have a reason that says electronic fuel injection or the GM way, MPFI, multi-port fuel injection, which is the opposite of TBI, which was throttle body injection, which you know what that was. It was basically a carburetor, but instead of a Venturi in a jet, it had one single
Fuel
injector spraying fuel. Yeah, I mean, it was the ghettoest. It worked, but it was the ghettoest.
It's very
way to do it.
American.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we won World War II also. It's
With
like
throttle body fuel injection?
No, with like shit that was kind of ghetto but worked, because you could just be like, oh, it's broken in the field, we'll fix it and continue on our way, as opposed to the German way where it's like, it's 3 thousandths out of alignment, we must send it back to the factory where it will be bombed and then we can't use it anymore. Sorry.
Is that what happened?
I mean, there was a lot of that in World War II where the Americans were just like, it's crude, but it works. And the German way was like, no, everything must be beautifully engineered.
And overly complicated.
Overly complicated.
And really the Japanese flew in and they're like, yeah, but now it's complicated. It works, but it's not complicated and it's cheap and MPFI, yeah. They're multi-port fuel injection badges on the size of like Chevy Citations.
5.7 liter Camaros, I think, too, also.
That,
or with the tuned port injection. That's what I'm thinking of.
Port injection.
Sorry.
Oh
Tuned
my
port
God,
injection.
I forgot about that one.
What other good ones we have?
No, did anyone ever have a carburetor badge? Or was that just a badge of dishonest? Dishonor?
Well, if you had more than one carburetor, the Hudson Hornet, you got the twin H power badge, which would mean, this car has 2 carburetors instead of just one.
What was it? Wasn't there a GM? Hold on, no. There was a GM product that had a Tri-Y, or like, wasn't there like a
Tri-Power.
Tri-Power?
That was a marketing name. I don't know if that was ever
3-carb
appeared.
setup.
Yeah, it was a 3-carb setup for V8. That was the hot
Corvettes.
setup.
Yeah.
Ford did that. I don't. Corvette may have also done it, but the high trim Ford motor
stuff?
for big blocks. That was the difference between an R code and a Q code. Was a single 4-barrel versus 3 2-barrels.
Three
for
why
a
the
V8.
fuck would you ever do 3? And from what I understand, basically there was a small carb and then the 2 big ones, and the 2 big ones sat idle doing absolutely nothing until like 80% throttle and load.
I believe that.
So those secondaries, which I guess would be the secondary, tertiary, whatever, didn't open until you were full throttle. So if somebody drove normally most of the time, those carburetors were never used. And what happens to fuel that sits in carburetors when it never goes through?
Turns to shellac.
Yes, and gums up. So basically they never ran right. I mean, that's my cursory understanding of this. But why you'd have one 2-barrel carb that's, serving 8 cylinders and then 2 other 2-barrel, like what the anyway. But I'm sure there was a badge for that. It was probably called broken, or like this thing will run like shit at all times, or if I floor it, it will spew black smoke.
Yes, and empty out my carb bowls.
Which actually would be the diesel badge from back in anything pre like 1999. Diesel badge would mean.
It's true. Mercedes was very keen on that plan for sure. And the 5 cylinders.
And Mercedes did turbodiesel badges on everything with a turbo, didn't they?
Correct. On the 300D and TD and SD.
They got actual turbo diesel badges.
Yeah, it went like a third of the way across the back of the car. What other ones? Speaking of fuel, selective fuel or cylinder deactivation, early cylinder deactivation of Corvettes, Cadillacs in like 1980.
V864 badge?
Yes.
That was amazing.
Yes.
I have never driven a V864 car, and I think it's because by the time I got my license, they were all like a year old and were therefore totaled and off the road.
Yes, due to mechanical suffering.
But yeah, they had, I think the trick on those cars was just disable the cylinder activation. But that was a V8, if for those who don't know, there was a V8 that could run on 6 cylinders or 4 cylinders, which is very common now. GM now calls active fuel management, AFM. Instead of like cylinder deactivation. But that was a very early ingenious system that did not work.
Yes, in response to the fuel crisis, the second fuel crisis, because that was 1980. But yes, it worked out poorly for them.
Apparently, like you could feel a huge judder when it shifted. Look, to be honest, today's Chrysler, the 6.4 liter cars and the V8s, they have cylinder deactivation, and it's clear as day. Because they're all loud, they're SRTs, and so you get this blah, 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 V8 burble that turns into this discordant driving down the road
while you're driving.
When they're going to 4 cylinders. So I had a Dodge Durango SRT 392 recently, and cruising down the interstate, it's like 1,300 RPM or 1,500 RPM, and it's just blah 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 in the background, and then you'd feel a little bit of a nudge, and just and it was this strange flat sound, clear as day. So the best.
Worth it to save fuel?
Yeah, it does, and it does save fuel. You can actually watch it as it switches between the modes, pick up 2 miles per gallon, so it's 10%. And the reason is actually nothing stops moving other than the valves.
Yes, of course.
It's actually because the throttle can be.
Valves?
It's actually so the throttle can be opened wider, because the biggest source of inefficiency, one of the biggest sources of inefficiency in a gas car, is the throttle. If you imagine every piston has to suck against a closed throttle, there's a loss in there. If the throttle can be cracked wide open or close to wide open, you're getting halfway to the benefit of diesel right there. So by disabling 4 of the cylinders, you're dividing the engine's maximum output at that speed by more than half, and therefore getting that much closer to the full throttle. Things you don't need to know for any reason. Thank you.
Didn't you mean, was this a plug for your other show, the Proper Care
Proper
and
Care and
Feeding?
Feeding, that's right.
Yes.
Where I yell at people for doing terrible things, but then explain why it was terrible, how it was terrible, and the reason why it was terrible, and how to properly manage your car, or the reason
And its
why.
terribleness. It's the baked-in terribleness.
Basically, it's just an excuse to look at the camera and spray a douche. That was fun. Anyway.
Did you bring a douche for this episode?
I'm wearing one.
Wow. Okay. What other technologies would you like to discuss besides douching technologies?
Water injection. Okay, so let's think about this. The current M4 has water injection, but does not have a water injection badge on it. The original 1962 Oldsmobile Jetfire had water injection, did not have a badge to say that. Has anyone done a water injection badge on their car? I bet if anyone did, it was a Japanese car company because they are like the kings of the badges.
Oh yes, there's like some Celica that has like 4-wheel steering. It's like a paragraph on the side of the car. I forget what it all is, but it's some Toyota Celica from the 80s that has literally a paragraph of technical features that takes up most of the door.
I feel like Toyota, like definitely the Japanese are kings on that. Like right now, if I think about what car has the most badges, like Porsche has 1 million of them, but it's nowhere close to the Toyota 4Runner, Pre-Runner, SR4,
SR5.
SR5. There's some other badge. Like there's a whole paragraph. It takes up the whole back of the truck. All things I don't need to know when I'm behind one. Tell me more. What other things have you come up with?
Yeah, we talked about twin cam and transmission related things. Like I love the fact that 5-speed was once important enough to make it onto the outside of like a Toyota pickup truck, or quite large letters, or a Honda Accord. It's like, say, did you know I have 5 speeds in my manual gearbox? And then of course the predecessor to that would be like to put overdrive on the outside of the car, which is very British. Did everybody use overdrive, or was it just like the British
badges or the technology?
Well, the technology, like I guess everyone had like a little switch.
Volvo
Volvos had them on top of the
yeah.
gear shift knob,
which just was like a gear that only was that a separate final drive or something on that?
I don't know how it works. It's electrically actuated, and in some cases, like on the vintage Ferraris, it can work on the top 2 gears. So you can get overdrive on 3rd or 4th gears.
And you can do an aftermarket overdrive on early American stuff, actually. That's just a final drive swap, and you swap it in, and it'll just swap to a longer final drive. And so technically your 3-speed is a 6-speed, technically, even though you'd never drive it that way. But in cruising, you'd click
There was a factory option for Mustangs that's pretty rare on Shelby GT 350s, the early cars. That was a 2-speed rear end, and there was like a lever on the tunnel, and you had to select one. So you got a drag set of gears, or you could have a street set of gears.
It's pretty cool.
It's kind of clever. One of my favorites is IRS, which independent rear suspension.
So not Internal Revenue Service?
No.
That would be really funny. People would just shoot at you if you had an Internal Revenue Service badge.
Or run.
So what was on?
So the Triumph TR4A had IRS. So not only the only difference between the Triumph TR4 and the 4A was that the A had independent rear suspension. So not only was it a different model designation, but it also had the letters IRS on the trunk lid.
Then it was superfluous to have the IRS.
Well, you needed people to know what the A stood for.
Well, why was it the TR4A and not the TR4 IRS?
That's a great question. That's really what it ought to have been.
Really should have been.
I don't know.
That's a lot of letters. TR4 IRS. That reminds me of like the TISA BMWs.
TISA.
You know TISA? Those were the race. They were the E21s? No, 2002. I can't remember. It was an old. Oh my God, the internet's going to crucify me on this one. But there was a TISA that was TI/SA. That was a special edition. Anyway, I'm trying to think of like other ridiculously long alphanumeric.
Well, MP412C.
That's a fucking
4G LTE.
4G LTE is your AT&T thing.
Oh, I thought that was part of the McLaren's model name. I just started saying letters and got carried away.
The one that I made fun of was in print and like back in the day was the Acura. Hold on, let me get this right.
Oh, SH.
Well, it was the TL SH-AWD 6MT was the official name of the car. 6MT wasn't put on a badge, but SH-AWD was SH-AWD. It was super handling all-wheel drive, which is hilarious.
I think I bet there's a lot of stuff that was JDM that never made it here, but was like, oh, it's in English, it must be cool for the Japanese domestic market.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I bet there's like a treasure trove of other weird.
Like, if you think about like flip the argument around, like if the Japanese thought everything that was in English was cool, the French hate when anything is in anyone else's language. So like they remember for a while there they outlawed the word hamburger in France. Because hamburger. They had to call it something else. Like you could not write the word
so there's
hamburger.
this thing called l'Académie Française, which is charged with like
being bitches.
The sanctity of the French language, maintaining the sanctity of the French language. And there's also these rules there about like any radio station cannot play more than X% of an hour in a foreign language. And so they have to play music in French for some portion of the hour, even if it's like top 40 radio station. But
so to that end, did any of the French ever put?
When they would say injection électronique, for the Citroën DS23.
That's a DS21 for those of us.
23.
23, sorry.
23, yes.
I'm trying to think. Like I can grossly picture an Automatique badge on the back of something.
Yeah.
But they never
probably.
did. But the French never did like abbreviations, did they? I mean, DS alone. That's kind of one of the coolest names in the history of the world because DS in French is pronounced déesse, which means goddess.
Correct.
D-E-E-S-S-E, right?
Yes, with
Déesse.
an accent grave.
Tu parles français aussi?
Oui.
Oui. On peut parler français ici?
Non.
Bonjour.
Everyone will hate us.
Yeah, everyone already does hate us. And everyone hates the French, so.
Exactly, that's what I mean. If you speak French, people will hate you.
More.
What
other things
more,
you got?
hate you more. Twin I-beam. That's an obscure one.
That's an obscure. That is the front
from like
suspension on Ford pickup trucks.
Is it?
From
Is that what it is? I don't know what it is, but like in the mid 60s, like 66-ish.
1860s.
Like Ford F100.
Yeah, I don't remember what year it was, but it was a early form of independent front suspension where I don't even remember what the fuck it worked, but it did something.
I like driving those. A friend of mine had one, and I drove it.
A twin I-beam Ford?
Yeah, it was a 4-speed, but the first gear was like a granny gear, so you weren't supposed to use first gear. You were supposed to start it in second. So it was like a 3-speed H pattern, like a dogleg 3-speed, and it was an inline 6. It was kind of fun, actually.
They were kind of slow, weren't they?
It was not nearly as slow as I would expect. Like, it was very happy going 75 miles an hour on the highway.
Really?
Yeah.
I remember 100 years ago, I bought a Jetta that had been crashed, and I bought it in Long Island, and I needed to tow it back to Pittsburgh. And my friend borrowed his dad's 6-cylinder early F, whatever it was.
Like from the 60s.
70s, maybe? And I just remember him being matted, foot on the floor, doing 60 miles an hour towing with a straight 6 screaming at probably 3,800 RPM or whatever it was. And it was just the most sensory overload, bouncing, hauling, bounding, leaving the ground, skidding. I mean, it was just how we fucking didn't die in this. And you compare that to today's pickup trucks, which are like, I have 12,000 pounds in the back. I can't tell.
Yeah.
But twin I-beam. What other pickup truck? Hold on. So, I mean, other than trim names, Lariat and Bighorn. Bighorn is my favorite. Like, really?
King Ranch.
Bighorn. Like, am I the only person who thinks that maybe there's something slightly suggestive there? Like that you have to have the smallest horn in the world to get a Bighorn edition? Bighorn? Really? Like, King Ranch is bad enough. I'm the king of my trailer park. But
those things are like 80 grand. You're not living in a trailer park if you have a King Ranch.
I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay. I don't know.
But yeah, I'm trying to think of other pickup truck terms. I'm sure there have to be others. Like my Isuzu did not have a single badge on it other than Isuzu.
Pup.
It said pup, which was P''UP, which stood for pickup. Yeah, very imaginatively named.
Very clever.
But I don't think it had there was no sign that it was an extended bed other than the fact that it said that it had an extended bed. There was no sign that it was the big block 2.3 carbed motor with a 5-speed. No one needed to know. It was just my business.
What else do we have? The Italians are, of course, everything's in Italian, so you get fuel injection is iniezione. Or,
Iniezione, yeah, that's a pretty word.
But it's fun to say.
Especially on the back of an Alpha because the script is beautiful.
Yeah, Maserati had this lovely cursive script, and then it had the trident. It was really beautiful, actually.
Here's a question. Were the early Maserati Quattroportes badged as Quattroportes?
They had no badge at all.
Because they wouldn't need it, right?
Because it had 4 doors.
Quattroporte is 4-door.
Yes.
Well, that's one of those names that...
The early Quattroporte 3s had the number 4 and then Porte, and then they spelled it out as Quattro, Quattro. But initially it was just the number 4 followed by the word Porte.
I mean, I guess
conjoined.
Saying Quattroporte or 4 doors or whatever is no better than cars that say coupe on them, because there have to be... Yeah. Hyundai Scoop was... That was a cool sports coupe. But I'm sure there are cars that say coupe on them, and it's like, no shit, Sherlock. I mean, does my SUV say SUV on it? Does my truck say truck
It does
on
say
it?
4x4.
Does, yeah.
That's because it's optional on a lot of things, or was optional initially, especially on trucks.
Yep. Although it didn't sell like a 4, they had like a 4
Alltrac.
Alltrac, that's what it was.
Alltrac, yes.
And everyone, I mean, Audi's got the best name for 4-wheel drive, Quattro. But so we have 4Motion was the VW name.
Yeah, xDrive, Formatic.
Formatic is a good one.
It sounds almost American. I think the word matic makes it kind of Americanese.
What is Porsche doesn't have a name for their all-wheel drive system. They just put a 4 on the badge.
4 on the
back.
car.
Does anyone else have a really good name for
Alfa Romeo calls it Q4.
Q4. They still do that, actually.
But that started with the 164.
Ferrari does not have it, but the
4RM.
4RM, that's what it was. That's what the FFs was called.
The system was called that.
Quattro ruote motrici, right? 4 wheels
Something like
motorized. That's what that stood for. Did Peugeot have they just put a 4 on their cars?
They never sold any 4-wheel drive cars in the U.S., so I don't think I ever was exposed to them. What else do we have here?
SH-AWD is the other one.
Yes. I think one of the things to me that's most interesting about this is the way that whatever technology that was like hot shit whenever the car came out is what makes it onto the outside of the car. Like nowadays you would never put that anything has fuel injection because everything has fuel injection.
Yeah, but they all put TSI. Like, the VW group is famous for the TSI and what was the predecessor for that? TDI, right? So TDI versus TSI,
Diesel.
but turbo stratified injection, that's a way of saying direct injection. And by the way, the Hyundais have GDI badge, gasoline direct injection. A lot of cars do still have injection badges. So there was MPFI and all that other stuff was now just become GDI, TSI, TFSI.
Yeah, that's true on the Audis.
Did BMW ever put any badges on there?
Well, always meant
was
injection.
Yeah.
Mercedes did it for Einspritzmotor.
Einspritzung is E. Yeah, that's funny. Of all the things, I think that's probably the most
Persistent.
durable. Yeah.
But like you wouldn't put, so what else? 5-speed or...
But you're right. The thing that makes me laugh about that whole thing is the idea of like, what are the most ludicrous things that car companies could put on their things now?
But it wouldn't be ludicrous. Like hybrid, is a thing that appears on the outside of cars with regularity now.
You're an asshole. But but wouldn't it be hilarious if they had CarPlay badges? Seriously, there were stickers on the sides of cars that said anti-theft system or anti-theft stereo in the 80s.
Yeah, but that was like a deterrent type of thing.
If a car said iDrive on it, it would be a deterrent thing for me. I won't go near it. I'm kidding. But seriously, we've sort of moved away from turbo to just a T badge, which made me laugh.
But turbo used to be very exciting.
Turbo was a big deal.
Especially in the 80s, if a car said turbo on it, it was always stylized, it was always prominent, it was kind of a big deal.
Often part of the car's name, a Saab 900 Turbo or a Porsche 911 Turbo was part of the car's name. I don't think we have that now.
That's because nowadays turbo is kind of required, and the differences have to do with more with the state of tune or the number of cylinders.
But every car company seems to have their own badge of so the holy trinity of modern engine management is variable valve timing plus turbocharging plus direct injection.
Oh yeah, so there was VTEC and VVTI was
VVTL, which is variable valve lift for Nissan.
So this is 90s.
VVTL is Toyota, yeah. So my Lotus is I can't remember. It's it's VVTL-i or something with variable valve timing and lift with intelligence. Audi has a VVT that I don't think they brand. No. But Valvetronic. So BMW started out with Vanos. Variable Nockenwellensteuerung, which is variable camshaft timing, and then they added infinitely variable valve lift, and that's Valvetronic, which is Infinity's V-Val. They all there's a lot of stickers and brand names about valves.
Yes, you have the 16 on the Porsche, 16 valve Porsches. It actually made it on the outside of the car. The Germans seem to do it a little bit less, where it actually makes it onto the outside of the car.
Yeah, they tend to be a little bit more restrained with that. But I'm just trying to think now of other technologies that would be fucking hilarious to have.
What is contemporary on edge would be
Super Cruise. Can you imagine Cadillacs had a Super Cruise badge or Tesla had an autopilot badge? Oh, he didn't get the autopilot. Doesn't have the autopilot badge. That'd be funny.
Yeah, now they have dual motor. Four-wheel drive is something that is always worth mentioning on the outside of a car, especially if it's available without. Everyone seems to still do it.
Everyone does that. Tesla's naming scheme is pretty cool because I like the, excuse me, the understated underline that you get. So if it says on a Model 3, if it says dual motor, you got a dual motor car. If it's underlined, that's a dual motor performance. In the same way, like if it says P100D, if it's underlined, you got the Ludicrous. And I love those little Easter eggy kind of you got to know. But I would find it really fucking funny if it had an autopilot badge on it.
It should almost be a big sticker that's like a warning.
Yeah, this car could be driving itself.
Well, it's like when you see the Chevy Cruise things that are they're bolts, but it's by the startup Cruise that they're self-driving. They have the radar and shit. Have you ever driving down a road that has no center line, like a narrow street oncoming? Have you ever veered into the oncoming to see what it does?
Another glimpse inside just how nice of a human being Derek Scott is.
It's for science. It's for science.
It's right. To watch the backup safety driver guy's eyes do this.
Well, the car's like, they don't like it.
Definitely played a little bit with. I mean, we live in the Bay Area, so there's autonomous testing all over. And they're kind of fun to just.
Well, and they do dumb shit where you're just like, oh, please, you're obstructing the flow of traffic. It also doesn't like when you lane split on a motorcycle. You come up behind it, and the thing will just, it'll do like an ABS stop in the center lane of like a road going 40 miles an hour.
But does it have an ABS badge on the back that's flashing? No. I mean, here's the thing. I would say that actually, there are some badges that are nice to know, and so vehicle to X communication, V2X communication, is a new field about having cars talk to things like traffic lights and whatever. And one of the things within that discipline is how do we as pedestrians and people and other cars on the road know when a car is driving itself? And it could have like a Super Cruise badge or an autopilot badge that's lit up, but they're
like a taxi.
Right, like a taxi. But they're looking at ways to actually communicate that by exterior lighting. So if like there's a green light on the back of the front of the car, then it's driving itself, or having it so when you go to cross an intersection, if there's an autonomous car, have it give you some sort of indication that it recognizes that you're there, so you know it's not going to hit you. Much in the same way that you would look at the driver and make eye contact.
Right, and if they're like spaced out, then you're like, well, they probably haven't seen me.
So you don't walk necessarily in front of the car. But that actually, some sort of way to communicate the state of awareness of the car would be something that is high tech and cool as shit right now and would be helpful on the outside.
More so than whether it had variable valve timing.
Yeah. 6. Can you imagine like a 10-speed badge on
a Ford pickup truck or a Mustang
like
rental
10
car?
Speed, yeah. Can you imagine like torque converter or like did anything have a dual clutch badge?
DSG
was never. I mean, they're like the thing on the shifter.
Porsche, PDK would be appearing inside the car, but it would tell the driver, not like the population at large.
SMG.
Did SMG ever appear on the outside of a car?
Not on the outside, but it was definitely a brand. They were so proud of that, those fucking Germans.
Oh, God, and it's so bad.
Hold on. Didn't Maserati have a Cambiocorsa badge? As if to say, watch out, I might roll backwards into you at any time?
I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that question.
Ferrari never had an F1 badge.
Yes, they did. On the back of a 355 F1.
That's right.
It's a separate red letter in the same font. It says F1 on the back of the 355.
To tell you that you have bought the wrong 355.
Yes.
Pardon me.
To tell the rest of the world that you've purchased the crap one.
Excuse me, everyone. I'm an idiot.
I have a very, very bad clutch habit. I just am addicted to clutch consumption. And so, I thought I'd let
an engine
everyone know.
Every 5 years is just too rich for my blood. Is too poor for my blood.
Yes, I would like people to know I have so much money.
I want to do a clutch every 2 years or 2,000 miles. So I bought the F1. You know what my other favorite inadvertent sign to people is that you've bought the wrong car? You see a Mercedes with the lighted hood ornament. And those people are like, I have bought me a Benz and it's fancy, and all I keep thinking is,
and it's financed.
Right. All I think is, you couldn't afford collision mitigation. You superficial twat, because you can't get
the illuminated badge with
the illuminated badge is where the
radar goes.
sensor would be. So that comes bundled obviously with adaptive cruise, but also forward collision warning, which is a genuinely important safety feature. So anytime you see a lighted Mercedes badge on the front, you know that person is living at home in their basement with their parents and are like strapping.
So that's the
together.
I financed my car badge.
Yeah.
Yes.
I financed my car at 14% interest. No offense to people who finance their cars at 14% interest, but you know.
But don't do that.
Just don't get the fucking lighted badge and no one will ever know. Just own it.
Correct.
Just don't get don't be poor and stretch to get a Mercedes and then broadcast to the world that you can't afford a safety feature.
Get the crap, especially if you're getting the crap one, then just get a VW if you want a good car. And arguably better car if you want a Mark 7.
I am not able to be objective about that because I have a Mark 7, but I would say
I understand they're very good cars.
They are very good cars. And you know what my car doesn't have it on the outside? Electric car badge or active cruise control or what other
It's too sensible and German to have that. I mean, but what technology now is exciting enough that you would want it on the outside of your car? You would want other people to know that you have. I think part of the issue is that the technology is so like obscure and advanced now that it's to try and put it in a badge, people would be like, I don't know what that is. I guess people would have said that about fuel injection in the 1960s.
And we're still doing four-wheel drive and fuel injection badges. And four-wheel drive is not exactly a major accomplishment at this point. I don't know why we're still insistent on the four-wheel drive badges.
Maybe it's so used car shoppers. I mean, I find it useful if I'm like shopping for a car that's available in either configuration. It's like, oh no, I want the rear-wheel drive one. Then it's nice to know like, oh, it doesn't have a 4MATIC badge. So that's like when I'm looking at a fuzzy picture on Craigslist or whatever.
Fair enough. Although you could just put the badge on. I mean, I'm sure people have done it. I'm trying to think, like, if I think about what are the most important advances technologically in cars of the last couple of years, stability control is the single. Hold on. Airbags were never on the outside of cars, but stability control is the single biggest contributor to automotive safety since the seatbelt.
Doesn't the Ford Transit?
Ford has an Advancetrac RST badge, which is roll stability, fucking something.
Okay.
Yes, which is as if to say,
this one's not going to roll.
I'm not going to roll.
Unlike the Explorers of the 90s.
I'm trying to think, did anyone do, like, this is such a...
control?
Yeah, or stability. I mean, it's a good thing that we've standardized the name of ESC, even though Porsche calls it PSM and BMW calls it DSC.
Did you just say Porsche?
Porsche calls it.
Okay.
Did I really?
We have to play the tape.
If by chance I said Porsche, it was only because I'm very sick. See, I have Halls with mentholyptus in it, and I'm going to have one. This is clear. Look at this. I did not. It was just because I was speaking too quickly. I don't say
That
Porsche.
word.
I say douche at people who say the word Porsche. See, look, I'm going to eat this, and I'm going to feel better. But yeah, I don't think anyone did stability control badges.
No, it's funny. Maybe because it's not viewed to have some kind of outward statement. Like the hybrid thing is important because it's important for other people to know that you have a hybrid, or like the PZEV thing.
PZEV. I would like for you to go outside, walk down the street, and ask 100 people what PZEV means, which is, by the way, a badge that Subaru put on the back of their cars.
I mean, I know what it means, but I don't understand how a gasoline car can be partially zero emissions.
Okay, so you know that it's partial zero emissions vehicles.
Yeah.
I think it's all CARB. I don't think it's even EPA, but in the emission standards in the U.S., there was a low emissions vehicle, an LEV, and then there was an ultra low emissions vehicle,
ULEV.
and then there was a super ultra low emissions vehicle,
SULEV.
and then they ran out of shit to say because you're not going to say like
ultra?
super duper ultra low fucking emissions
I mean,
vehicle.
I would.
So after SULEV comes PZEV, which is partial zero emissions vehicle, and basically, I think the thought process was it's because the next one after that is ZEV, zero emissions vehicle, and I think they just ran out of names after SULEV. But does anyone know what their fucking PZEV badge on the back of their Subaru means?
Does anybody care?
Then why are you spending?
People care about hybrid, or so like Volvo when they first came out with
SIPs,
on the emissions lambda sonde, like. Why would they put that on the? So the lambda sensor is an oxygen sensor.
Correct.
It's required for effective three-way catalyst function because
Yes, because
you
catalyst
need
will
to
melt
be
down.
in exactly the right stoichiometric window
Look at you.
to get all three forms of catalyst working properly. And if you operate anywhere away from that, then it's like there's three curves that intersect only at one spot. And
You should do a show called Proper Care and Feeding of Cars.
I don't know.
That was good.
So in any case, you need an oxygen sensor to make sure that the car is operating in exactly the right window, or else the catalytic converter doesn't do the three things that it's supposed to do, which is NOx, SOx, and HC. Oxides of nitrogen, NOx, SOx, and HC.
What are
right?
SOx?
Sulfates.
Oh.
I don't know. It's particulates.
Nerd.
I took a class once in college.
On what? On lambda sensors? Like oxygen sensors?
No. It was a class in college about
Obscure shit.
environmental engineering.
Good for you. I did not.
In any case, Lambda Son was something that Volvo put in the front of their grills of their cars in
Along
the
with
early
the penis
80s.
symbol.
Yes, that's right, the male symbol. They did that on purpose originally. I watched a documentary about Volvo's history.
Keep going, Derek Scott. Keep going.
Let's
gonna fuck with
revisit
my whole thing.
Topic.
Yes, so your point is that it's not sexy enough for...
Well, emissions is sexy in the social consciousness sense, where it's like, say, did you know I'm trying to help the environment?
Because driving the fucking Prius isn't bad enough. No, I'm kidding. No, you're right. No, people definitely want people to know that you're driving a fuel cell vehicle or a hybrid vehicle or an electric vehicle.
Yeah, like
or
the electric RAV4 had the big thing on the side that said that. So it's kind of like a social proofing thing.
And you know what? It's interesting. Tesla doesn't really badge their cars. They had...
Yeah, but the whole fact that they only make electric cars...
And yet, their license plate frames say what?
Zero emissions vehicles or
yeah, something like that. They say no emissions or zero emissions. And then unless you get an all-wheel drive car in which it says all-wheel drive. And that's from Tesla. And this is my point.
I would like to get one of those and put it on like something with Webers.
Ironically, yes. I'm going to put those on like the Ferrari or something.
Yes, exactly. It'd be perfect for the Ferrari.
Do you know that I have a manual Gearbox Preservation Society license plate frame on the e-Golf and no one has ever called me on it?
Really?
Not one person has been like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Does that car even have a gearbox?
It does. Technically, it's a single speed
box filled with gears.
And because I select drive with a physical connection to the transmission, I think it is actually, I would consider it a manual. When I pull that lever, it's an actual...
That is entirely horseshit because you do that... Because if you do in an automatic, which also has a physical connection,
yes,
you're doing
but then
exactly
it chooses its own gears and changes them. I don't. But anyway, ironically, and
I'm going to do this again because you're still full of bullshit. I think you need to go back to bed and take
suck on another Halls. No, I ironically, and for the purpose of comedy, have a manual Gearbox Preservation Society license plate frame. But I think I should have a zero emissions.
I need to get a Stanford mom one for my hot mom wagon.
That's true.
You know,
your E500 wagon. But it's so funny that car companies will obsess over tenths of a cent on a part, and they will push suppliers to the point where these guys will go out of business over literally tenths or hundredths of a penny. And yet, Subaru spends stupid money, because badges are expensive, spends money on a PZEV badge that is meaningless to everyone. And Tesla...
They think it'll sell cars.
Right, and Tesla, which is an all-electric brand that has never made an engine, a car that can emit pollution, spends money on a license plate frame that says zero emissions.
They do it for the customers.
Clearly, which is kind of crazy. I can't believe that they can fight over 2 cents. For example, the difference between, and we should do a whole episode on this, amber turn signals, right?
Yes.
So
I hate this because I want them, and it's like $1 billion.
It's like €12 a car is the difference between a clear LED that lights up amber and like a red LED. It's not a lot of money. And I want to strangle the product planners at every single luxury car
the
brand.
fundamental assumption is that turn signals should be amber and not red.
Yes.
Let's just get that out there.
Yes, because if you can only see one taillight, you don't know whether it's a brake light, a tail light, or a turn signal.
Correct. Like if you're coming down, lane splitting on a motorcycle and I see someone tapping their brakes and I'm like, is that a turn signal or are they tapping their brakes? Are they about to cross my path?
Correct.
Or are they just indecisive with the brake pedal?
You also don't know whether it's somebody with only one remaining brake light working out of the 2 or 3 that they have. There's a huge safety benefit to having amber turn signals.
I agree.
And it's
the
not
fact
done.
that it's not, and there's so many other stupid safety regulations in the United States.
Like the one stopping us from having decent headlights, for
Yes,
example? Yes.
Precisely. In
And
any
yet,
case.
our stupid government allows red turn signals, which are used by luxury car companies, even though they are definitely killing hundreds of thousands of people a day. If I'm going to exaggerate, I might as well go for it. And yet, car companies spend stupid money on badges like that are PZEV badges that are meaningless, or compressor. That's another one on the side of Mercedes.
It's a lot of letters.
It's a lot of badge.
They don't do that anymore, though, do they?
No, Mercedes doesn't make
it.
it.
BiTurbo,
Yeah.
on the AMG products
Yep.
and stuff like
Which
that. That's one on each side of the car, and then.
And I guess if you're, if you're charging another $50,000 for the AMG version of it,
Then
you
there's
know,
probably a
$1.75 can
space
go
for
to
a
the
few
badge.
dollars of badges.
What other ones did you have over here? Anything else fun? Radial tune suspension.
That just sounds like everyone should watch this thing, the video about the turbo encabulator.
Yes, the
like
fake.
where the guy is just like saying a bunch of words that like sound like engineering, but is just completely like fabricated.
You're talking about that? You're talking about the whole politics thing going on in our government,
Yes.
right? Okay. Yeah, radial tune suspension.
It just sounds like nothing.
It was actually something. It was suspension that was tuned for this new type of tire called a radial tire. But if the car came with the fucking radial tires, which are fairly obvious from the outside, by the way, why do you need to have a badge? Or even better,
what car was
handling by Lotus. This is an admit. So this is on like Isuzu had this.
Yeah.
Can you imagine somebody in Isuzu going, right, we make terrible cars that are ill-handling and horrible. How are we going to admit that and tell people, we've brought in another car company to fix our shitty tuning. Aha! We will put a handling by Lotus. Could you imagine Mercedes putting a handling by Porsche badge on your E500?
I mean, they both make great cars, so I think it's Isuzu like admitting like, oh, we have a brand equity issue because people are like, oh, I see you.
Yeah.
You have no choice but to buy an Isuzu.
Sorry about your 240 credit score. May we offer you an impulse? I mean, if I'm being rude already, I've already pissed off everyone with bad credit in this episode. I'm trying to think of other examples.
Wait, return to the radial tune suspension. What car was this? This has to be an American, like a GM product.
I feel like it was GM.
And probably
I feel like it was Pontiac. Which also had the wide track bullshit, and the cars were narrower than the other ones, which was kind of hilarious. But yes, that is such an American car thing. Radial tune suspension. Although, wasn't there a British car that had electronic petrol injection or something?
Triumph, called fuel injection. Yeah, but fuel injection we've already talked about is like kind of important. But it's just, they called it PI, the Triumph TR5 PI, because the TR5 was sold in the US as the TR250 with a carbureted engine. And so it was, in the US only, it was called the TR250. And then elsewhere in the world, the car was sold as the TR5 PI for petrol injection.
Was there a PI badge on it?
I think so.
Because I would totally buy a Ferrari 308 GTB and put a PI badge on it.
For petrol injection, which you
for
haven't
Magnum
got.
PI, Private Investigator. Come on!
Yes.
308 is a Magnum PI car.
Yes, but
who taught you how to write? Somebody with the palsy?
I'm left-handed.
Oh, sorry. That doesn't mean anything. Police Interceptor. Okay, this is another fun one. Like, I'm going to intercept the police. Who thought of this name? I mean, okay, it's Ford back in the day.
It was the hot setup to get and to make it publicly available.
But doesn't it imply that you're like intercepting the police? Like if I'm a mail interceptor, I'm intercepting your mail before it gets to you. M-A-I-L, not M-A-L-E, because that's fucking weird. Stop it, that's gross.
No, the thing that does the intercepting is the car, and so it's an interceptor. It's like it's a throwback to airplanes, right? Interceptor was a category of airplane which was designed to, like, if there's a bomber coming to drop bombs, then the interceptor goes and intercepts it and prevents the bomber from reaching its destination. So a police interceptor, like the car,
Intercepts
is like
the police. This is your tool to outrun the fucking cops?
It's an interceptor used by the police. That's why they're all on Crown Vics.
I mean, I get it, but it's just, if you start to really think about it, it's a little bit not well thought out.
I mean, a lot of this is not well thought out, or just plain old gimmicky.
I think that's really
anything. I mean, anything to sell a car, basically. That's why the Americans are thinkers. Well, the Japanese did a lot of weird stuff, but they kept most of it sort of limited for domestic consumption because they're like, oh, it's in English, it must be cool. So
that's. I mean, there's definitely a appreciation for like the English, you know, the coolness like
of something being in a foreign language. For sure.
I mean.
Okay, what would you most like to see now added to a car in badge form? What would add a great deal of value to you?
Ironic value or actual value?
Any kind, humorous value or like...
I think actually what I said is if the car has the ability to autopilot, whether that's level 2 automation, you know, meaning like a Super Cruiser or an autopilot, or 3, 4, 5, you know, or the ability, if the car is driving itself, I would like to know that it is actively doing that, but that's not a badge, that's a light. I feel like, to be honest with you,
natural aspiration.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing, especially if it was in German, because naturally aspirated in German is Saugmotor, which is a suck motor. Because it sucks as opposed to being blown.
Is that the same name that they call vacuum cleaners also?
A Staubsauger, that's a dust sucker. The Germans...
I love the way that Germans use the word Zeug. Like it just is like so like how do you say airplane?
Flugzeug.
Which means...
Flying thing.
Okay. Other examples?
Spielzeug, a playing thing, a toy. Feuerzeug, which is a lighter, it's a fire thing. It's a thing to do a thing. So the badge is like a Drecksackzeug, a douche thing. Like the whole idea of a badge on a car is really just superficial bullshit.
So debadge all the things.
No, I kind of like I like my 190 E2.316.
Yeah, I mean, I think some really iconic badge designs have been done, and it's kind of cool like, to just look at the way that they stylize things.
But maybe I think we're all in agreement that you shouldn't put technology like options or technological innovations because at some point they become silly and we'll make fun of them in a Carmudgeon's episode.
I like it. It's very charmingly period. I like the fact that I could buy a car that says it has IRS on it. Only car ever. It's kind of cool.
I think you should buy DTS badges for all of your cars. That was DeVille Touring Sedan. Come on!
No,
seriously?
I'm the one who's going to leave.
Go, because I'm going to buy you a stack, like an entire bag of DTS badges.
To go with my geriatric spirit.
Yes, exactly. And by the way, your name. If there was a car named Camiso or like, you know.
My brother's name starts with a G, so he's got GTS, which is much cooler. Because there's a lot of GTS cars.
Everything GTS is Celica GTS. 911 GTS, 928 GTS,
Ferrari, other than
shit,
the one
you
without
got
the roof.
the
I know, I got the
short end of the stick.
I got the shit litter.
Yeah, sorry DTS. I'm buying you an old Cadillac badge.
At least you're not buying me a whole old Cadillac.
That may come with it.